Mic check. Mic check. Mic check. Hi guys. Is it on? Is it on? Hi guys. We're about to get started, but just a kind reminder to please sit up straight. Let's not be on our phones. Let's pay attention and let's, soak in what Africa Week is all about. Hi guys, just a kind reminder again. Let's please not be on our phones. Let's sit up and let's be paying attention. Thank you. Good morning, everyone, distinguished guests, staff, student, and our wonderful panelists. My name is Andrea Makubuya, and I'm the Panel Forums Executive for Africa Week 2026. Today, our theme for today's panel is the art of the industry. And this year's Africa Week theme, the Amplified Mosaic, Africa's Vibrant Resonance, reminds us that Africa's identity is not fixed. It is constantly being shaped by the voices, stories, and creativity of its people. Through art, we preserve our heritage, challenge perspectives, and imagine new possibilities for our continent. And most importantly, this theme is a call for young Africans to recognize the power of their own creativity and originality, and to add their voices to the ever-growing mosaic that defines Africa on its own terms. We are honored to have such inspiring voices with us today, and I am pleased to introduce our panelists who will be guiding us through this conversation. Mr. Kortisi Sibanze is a transformation catalyst, creative strategist, and one of Eswatini's leading multidisciplinary communicators. A true multiplicity of expressions, he seamlessly moves between the worlds of leadership development, media, arts, and public speaking. He is a radio and television presenter, program director, ambassador, and host of the MTN Bushfire Schools Festival, and recently appointed as the chairperson of the National Art and Culture Awards 2026. With over 2 decades of experience across Africa and internationally, Kortisi has facilitated leadership and transformation programs for governments, corporates, educational institutions, and communities using a unique blend of cognitive science, purpose coaching, storytelling, and creativity to inspire personal and organizational growth. Mr. Mmeli Hlanze is a Mandela Washington Fellow, Creative Industries Executive, Cultural Practitioner, and Copyright Administrator from Eswatini, with over a decade of experience in the creative and cultural industries. He began his journey in 2012 by co-founding Anecdote Music, one of Eswatini's first digital record labels and artist management agencies, helping pioneer digital music distribution in the country. Through Anecdote Music and the Anecdote Culture Foundation, he has designed and led artist development, capacity building, and cultural programs that help artists monetize their talent and build sustainable creative careers. Ms. Masentle Tandiswa Dlamini is a Swazi filmmaker, producer, director, writer, set designer, broadcaster, and creative storyteller whose work brings Swati heritage and identity to life through film and media. She uses storytelling to celebrate Swazi traditions, preserve cultural narratives, and create work that resonates with audiences locally and globally. Her journey in visual storytelling began through documenting cultural moments from a young age, including traditions such as the Mhlanga reed dance and Nkwala. She later developed her passion into a career in film and television, becoming a creative force within Eswatini's growing creative industry. She has produced documentaries and creative projects, including My Journey to Mhlanga, which explores cultural heritage through the experiences of young Swazi maidens. Through her work, she continues to create stories that celebrate culture, identity, and the richness of Swati experiences. Ogutle, our very own Waterford student, is a proud Leswati and passionate advocate for African identity, culture, and faith. She's the founder and creative director of the Christian Dance Club here on campus and the founder of Lead Christian Talks, creating spaces for worship, dialogue, and community. Over the past year, she has served as her cohort's academic representative, and she manages 3 of our football teams on campus. Beyond school, she has engaged with the Young Woman Empowerment Consortium, worked with the Goshen Women's Shelter, and led Eswatini's UWC Day country stall. Through her leadership and service, Ogutle is committed to celebrating African heritage and exploring how tradition can inspire authentic, forward-looking narratives for the continent. And last but not least, we have our moderators, Sipho Ngumalo and IB1, and he will be guiding us through today's conversation. I hope you all enjoy very much. Thank you.
Good morning, community. As said before, my name is Sipho Ngumalo, and I will be your moderator for today's panel. And on behalf of the panelist team, we extend a very warm welcome to our second panel of today. The theme for today's panel is the art of industry. This discussion will explore what is practically needed to enter and flourish within Africans' creative industries, and enforcing the display of how the whole striking nature of African art emerges through constant efforts, habits, and intentional leadership. This strategic panel deconstructs the idea that culture is collective work, shared knowledge, and access support structures that create the foundation for creativity. But what does this mean? What does it mean to be a part of the African creative industry? And who are the people to look for in assistance with this? And what spaces do we as individuals have to create or encourage to create to acknowledge these types of creative ecosystems and build global foundation for African artistry? Now that we fully understand what the theme means, let us move on to our first question. Panelists, what role do you currently play in the creative industry, and has it always been this way?
Mic check, 1 2 1 2. Hello and good morning, everybody. Yeah, you guys all right? You guys look a little bit stiff, so we're just checking, because in the space of the art of performance, the energy we give off from the stage is the energy that we're getting back from you guys. So we're just inviting you to not only participate by listening, but also participate by just throwing positive vibes this way. Is that all right? All right, great stuff. So the role that I currently play in the creative space in the Kingdom of Eswatini, I did say I'm a multiplicity of expressions. I am on radio. I do have a couple of TV appearances. I actually have a show on SABC1 called Broken Society, and I'm the lead program director for the Recharge Your Marriage conference tour, which is taking place in South Africa. We've got another one coming up in about 2 weeks. And then I am the National Arts and Culture Awards chairperson. I still do dabble in the space of being a creative myself, but I've sort of like taken the role of now creating the conducive environment that I wish was in place when I was still active as an artist.
Sanbonani. So as mentioned, my name is Meli Hlanze. Currently, I play a couple of roles, but I would say the most distinct one is largely I help creators to monetize their work, to monetize the creations that they create, and I do so through what we call copyright licensing. So everything that's created has copyright, which means it's protected, which means if someone else uses it, the person who created it needs to get paid. So I ensure that the producers, the songwriters, the artists that create music, whose music is used, whether it's on radio, TV, restaurants, events, they get paid royalties for that. Authors who write books, when their books are used, whether it's in the education system or otherwise, they get paid royalties for that. So I work largely in copyright administration with an organization called the Eswatini Copyright and Neighboring Rights Society. But outside of that, I am also a co-founder of an NGO called the Antidote Culture Foundation, which focuses on artist development. And we have a space in Babane, maybe some of you might have been there, called Yini Logo. Thank you.
Sali Bonani, Dumalang, bonjour, da Varmini. My name's Masuntle Tandiswa, Mwagadlaminis Bongo. I am what I consider a multidisciplinary artist, primarily focusing on film and television, broadcasting. I'm a set designer. I mean, the list goes on and on. I believe I'm a one-stop shop where film and TV are concerned, because I also produce, I write, I perform. Like I said, I wear many hats. The pun is intended. However, it didn't start that way. It wasn't always that way. I started off as a photographer in high school. I attended Kobe Ramukhadi Advanced Learning Academy, and I started photography when I was in grade 10. I started making money from photography in grade 11. So from then, I think that's how I then ventured into the film space, into motion picture. I started with still pictures, then I ventured into motion pictures as a medium of storytelling. Above all and everything, I am Swazi. So I am also passionate about who I am and where I come from. Therefore, one of my biggest mandates is cultural curation and preservation. Yeah, thank you.
Sani Bonani, my name is Uwc, and I am a dancer, I am a choreographer, I sing, and I believe that my main goal, or something that I aspire to be in the industry, is someone that allows people to be able to freely express themselves using their arts, to find belonging and a place where they can be able to express themselves and be who they truly are.
So as individuals or as students, we can see that the panelists that we have on this stage today are very qualified and people who you can seek assistance to when you are trying to delve into the creative space. Now, with this expertise in the creative space and in personal expression as a creative art form, what pressures do you think impact your personal expression, and how do you navigate them while staying true to your message? To repeat the question, what pressures impact your personal expression, and how do you navigate them while staying true to your message?
Maybe I'll go first. So I'll answer from a perspective of someone who works with artists and not the artists per se. But what I've seen is that the pressure of the bottom line, the aspect of having to make money from what you're doing, I find hinders or affects a lot of artists when in the process of their creative expression. I find that the fact that, for example, if you're a musician and you're in the studio, the fact that you have to make a hit often affects the process and the outcome. So definitely the pressure to make money, and largely, I guess, the pressure that comes with the audience. Will the audience receive it? Will the audience like it? Will the audience resonate with it? Often affects the process of creation. And I think the best way to navigate that is to remember the why, or to go into it with a level of authenticity For example, if you're a songwriter, writing from a place of being authentic, whether it's your own experiences or experiences of people you know, and not necessarily writing to appease the audience. I mean, you can definitely do that as well, but the more you remain authentic and true to what the message you're trying to communicate, I feel allows you to express yourself without those limitations. So yeah, I think from me, that's the one that I've seen a lot of artists and creators face.
I'm going to answer this question from a student's perspective, and a pressure that I've seen or experienced a lot as a student is society's perspective on the arts and how they can allow you to earn a living. Like, for example, obviously I'm a student, and the people around us, or our elders and the people that take care of us, often view art as a way to like express yourself, or like something you can do on the side, but they don't really allow us to fully develop our crafts and potentially allow it to be something that we grow into and potentially make a living out of it. So I feel like that's a pressure that a lot of us experience, and yeah.
I'd just love to echo Magama, Mr. Mneli, which are rather the elements of the pressure of perfection and creating something that will align and be seen and understood and accepted by the audience. And also, one of the pressures that we face in the film industry is working with people, human capital, because you cannot make a film by yourself, if we are being honest. So managing different personalities from different walks of life and different backgrounds, that's also a pressure that we face whilst creating, because you also need to micromanage that in order to be in the same page, because we want to create something that is uniform, that speaks in one language, for better words. But more than anything, the pressure of getting things done the way that you want it to be done, and because of the human capital, paying people in the industry that has just developed in our country, we really owe it to people to pay them for the work that they do, because this is not just a side quest. This is what I do for a living. This is how I make my bills get paid. It is an art form, but ultimately it is how I earn a living. So I think one of the pressures is being able to get the funds to pay the people that are working on the projects. Thank you.
All right. So from where I'm sitting as an artist, as a creative, the pressure that perhaps a lot of other spaces or other industries don't actually get to experience is the pressure of your inner circle not believing in what you do. And when I say inner circle, I am starting in the house. When you tell your parents that you want to be an artist and your parents look at you like you are out of your mind. True story. When I had the conversation with the parental unit and told them that I want to be an artist, my father called a family meeting for them to pray for me. They went in. Should have bought a Honda, Hosh Karamaima, cash content, aha, Jesus take the wheel, because this boy is out of his damn mind. So now you have an inner circle that actually doesn't believe in you, your talent, and what it is that you can do. A lot of us sitting on this stage, and for a lot of you out there, are probably going to be the first generation in your family that pursues the arts professionally. So that pressure on its own is something that perhaps other industries don't actually get to experience, because when they ask you, who have you seen in this family, in this village, do successfully what it is that you say you want to do? And now you have to sit there and say, and I quote the conversation that I had with my parents, just because it hasn't been done does not mean that it cannot be done. What if it means I'm supposed to be the first one? And as you know, parents don't like smart answers. So yes, I got smacked for being smart with them. But that is a pressure that is unique to us as the first generation of artists. This idea that your first haters are in the house.
So I've seen through this discussion, there are many challenges that we as individuals face when finding place in our creative areas. For me personally, when I used to do art, it was very hard for me to find inspiration that was authentic to me. I didn't know how do I incorporate my identity but still appeal to the masses. Who do I look to sell my artworks? Who do I look to display it in a gallery? And with that being said, that also shapes your identity because you still want to monetize what you are doing. So my question for you panelists is, how do you balance that expression of identity with that need for monetization and that need to still keep your head over the water instead of relying solely on your creative skills?
Funny enough, the cohort and I were having a conversation in the waiting or the holding area about how mostly we've been taught to color inside the lines. Therefore, that has hindered us from being creative outside of what we've been taught or seen. That is creativity from the diaspora, whether it's filmmaking. We've always been taught about Christopher Nolan, and that is the perspective that I have learned to tell film. But fortunately for me, I've seen that because I am a culturally, what is the word? Okay, I'm a culture curator and I'm basically rooted in being Liswati. So I think what helps me then is that because my ideology or my goal is to preserve what the little information that we do have of ourselves, I think that makes things a bit easier. But like we said, unfortunately, most of our ways of thinking are now boxed into the ways that we've been grown and exposed to. But I think it's about time that we step out of that box and step up of all the boxes, in fact, and just color out of the lines. And maybe you could come up with a new art form, you know, another way of expression. So yeah, I think that's the best way I could answer.
Going off of her answer, I think that from a young age, we've definitely been taught to color in the lines. But as we've grown up and we've gotten to the age where it's time to find ourselves or find out who we are, there is this societal pressure to sort of be like everyone else, to look like everyone else, to sound like everyone else. And I feel like that really suppresses people's expression of who they really are. And yeah, I feel like that's a problem that we really need to work on as a youth, so that we can actually grow and take the initiative to actually dig deep into who we are, so that we may be able to come up with innovative ways of thinking or acting or expressing ourselves.
I would say, I would want to put it differently. I think the challenge is that, or rather, the moment at inception you think money, then whatever follows will be flawed. I think at inception, say you're a new artist or an emerging artist, or you're looking to go into the creative sector, first and foremost, for me, again, maybe making it similar to the process of starting a business, is solve the problem. Yes, you have the talent, but where will you place your talent in the world? And how do you want to express your talent? And how do you want your talent to be received? Which is the first challenge that an artist must overcome. Finding themselves, finding their voice, and finding the values that they want to communicate and the message in which they want to do so. I think once you find that first as an artist, I can equate it to those maybe who are studying business. You have what you call a minimum viable product when you're starting a business, which is the least that you need to put the product into the market. Even in art, you need to get to a point where you have some sort of minimum viable product that you can sell or that you can put out. And it's at that point for me when you then start thinking monetization, right? And maybe to put it in another way, for art, rather than a minimum viable product, you have what is called a minimum viable audience. So a lot of artists miss the community building or the audience building phase. And I think one of the reasons for that is the internet. The internet largely puts us in a position whereby we want to create something and we want to quickly put it out. And once we've put it on the internet, we believe the consumption becomes automatic. You don't see now artists doing things at a grassroots level. You don't see artists doing things. I once said to an artist once who was on the come up, I think you should do a bus rank tour. And they felt like I'm above that level. And I was genuinely saying, do you know that if you go to every bus rank in Eswatini and you perform your music there, you are building a community, you are building an audience that can actually go on to support you. So I think as artists, we need to focus on building audiences first. We need to focus on being clear on the messages that we want to communicate, because that's what draws people to you. I'm sure all of us here, our favorite artists, they're your favorite artists because of something that they say or something that they represent. So we need to find that first. We need to perfect that first. And then once we have that, of course, then also learning the business side of it is then easier to scale it up as with a startup or any small business.
All right, I just want to take it a step further from what Mr. Hlanzi has just said. What's up, Black Note? Hi. Yeah. So the other thing that comes into play, especially when we are now talking commercializing our art form, there's this concept that says you have to be interesting, or you have to be interested in order to be interesting. So before you can expect people to pay for your creative artwork, are you paying for anyone else's within your industry, within your community? Right now, I'm wearing a concept shoe from a designer from South Africa. This is Black Degree. He's in Manzini. This is my own design, and this is from Eclairi. Are you investing in the industry that you are expecting to invest into you as well? And unfortunately for a lot of us, that's where this thing goes left from the very beginning. So don't expect to be interesting if you yourself are not interested.
Yes. Audience, I hope you guys are taking notes. I hope you guys have your notebooks and everything out. This is very, very valuable knowledge. Now, many valuable points were in this conversation and within this conversation that were discussed. And I really like the conjoined point of media and how the media perceives artistry and how we perceive artistry in media. And we live in a very digital age right now. And majority of the trends or what we consume on platforms such as Instagram or TikTok, it's very Western-led. It's very much from the Western world, normally America. We like having the American things. Even the shoes I'm wearing, I was influenced by an American on TikTok. But this now raises the question, as Africans, how do we appeal to that Western-dominated atmosphere with our African identity? So the formal question is, does African expression rely on foreign markets and standards for legitimacy? And how can we ensure that global success does not compromise the authenticity of African creative expression?
All right, so speaking from the perspective of somebody who also dabbles into fashion and creation, the short answer is no. we definitely have receipts of African inspired creators and fashion designers who are taking over the global market. Actually, you probably even notice if you pay attention to like whether it's New York Fashion Week or Paris Fashion Week, there's a lot of now African inspiration in terms of the designs that they're wearing. What drives that? That is also driven by the emergence of Amapiano, the emergence of Afro beats. So the music almost has like a direct. The music and the fashion are in the same WhatsApp group. They kind of like influence and impact the world at the same time. So the question becomes, how do I as a creative remain authentic, pay attention to what's working in the world, and then figure out how do I create my own interpretation of it. Like I said, this shirt, I figured out, okay, so the baggy baseball kind of shirt is a thing, but how do I own it? Slap the lihia on it to make it funky. I've got the step down design. I've got a zip on the side and it's slanted to the design. I've added fashion attitude by folding it by the arms. So now I've taken something that the world can easily identify it with, but I've made it my own, so that it doesn't matter where in the world I am. As soon as I walk in the room, they're like, he looks like us, but he's got his own twist to it. It's kind of different. So the short answer is no. We definitely have our own markers, and we definitely have the opportunity to put our own footprint on what the world looks like, whether it's music, fashion, or film. Right now, Polygamist is trending in the whole world, a South African film. So again, we do have the opportunity to impact and influence what the world feels or how the world views us in Africa as creatives.
Yeah, I agree with what Courtesy has said. To your question, yes, they do. The West does control the platforms where we are looking to put out our content or our works is controlled by the West largely. And maybe that is a challenge to us as Africans to start thinking about localized platforms that give us a more control over that consumption, and more importantly, over how our creators then get paid from that consumption. But I just want to echo what Courtesy has said about the opportunity that exists currently for the African story. The West has exhausted all their stories. They really have nothing more to tell us or to sell to us. The reality is now the world is hungry for the African story. The world is hungry for the African narrative. And to bring it even closer to home, I think the world is hungry for the Eswatini story. And I think we have a big challenge that we have to step up to start telling the Eswatini story. And there are many ways to tell the Eswatini story. Yes, it can be from the point of our cultural heritage, but it's also from our lived experiences. Growing up in Babane, what have you experienced? What have you gone through? Growing up in Manzini, growing up wherever, Minengwaselbulin, growing up Elbulini, Mepulusa Tinghomo. Those are the perspectives, those are the narratives, those are the stories, whether it's in film, whether it's in music or otherwise. We have an opportunity to start crafting those and telling those. And trust me, I truly believe, and I think there's so much evidence of it, as Courtesy has also mentioned about the Polygamist, that the world indeed is ready to hear newer stories, and specifically the African story.
To answer your question, Mr. Nimalo, it's to say we are not influenced by the West would be a lie, because the buildings that we are in, the clothing, types of clothing that we culturally that we are currently clad in, some of these things do not originate from Africans or even us as Emaswati. During my honors research thesis, where my study was focusing about decolonial filmmaking, I read that Marcus Garvey once said that a people without knowledge of their past and where they come from is like a tree without a root. Now, if you don't have a root as a tree, I'd love to believe that you don't have nutrients. You cannot grow. There's a certain stagnant situation that you are going to stay at. But I believe, regardless of the fact that we've been influenced by the West, I believe it is about time we go back and revisit where our roots are. Because if we find our roots, then we're able to be held firm on the ground and where our identity is concerned. I believe that the world, like the gentlemen have said, the West has exhausted their stories. I believe the world is hungry for the African culture, the African lingo, that our language, our music, our way of thinking and conversation, the humor. You know, there's a lot of humor, inside jokes that you don't get if you don't get the culture. You know, you might just find yourself so selemuva. But yeah, I definitely am a believer that it's about time that we revisit who we are so that we are able to create something that is more authentic to who we are and where our identity is concerned.
Okay, so their perspectives aren't something that I'd initially thought of, but I believe that for the longest time, the West has often viewed Africans as a peculiar species, you know, quite interesting, like not necessarily always in a positive light. And I believe that as a people, as Africans, it's time we really dig deep into who we are and stop seeking validation or approval from the Western world. I believe that if as Africans we got together and we united and actually believed in ourselves, I feel like we wouldn't need to seek all of this approval or anything actually from the Western world, because I feel like we can or we are able to sustain ourselves as a people.
So in yesterday's Africa talk, we were discussing about African filmmaking and African media in general. And there was a very important point that was brought up. When you are integrating African artistry into the Western world, you obviously have to cater to the people who were there first, the Western world. But my question is, do you think foreign or Western markets may dilute the richness of African culture through its influence on their media?
I specialize in. So like Mr. Meli Shanze had stated previously, that ultimately the media is from the West. From the beginning and the inception of that ideology of media, it came from the West. That means they are the holders, they are the decision makers on what goes on in there, right? That being the radio, newspaper, print media, even the film, which has directed our thoughts. Because I don't know if you guys know that media is such a powerful tool which directs what we think of ourselves, what we believe of ourselves, and what we know of ourselves. Because this is information that we get from the news, this is information that we get on TikTok, this is information that we get on Facebook, and etc. So I am a firm believer that it is up to us now to create our own platforms. We have technology, we have the internet. Instead of maybe scrolling and taking in the information and the knowledge that has been presented to us, maybe it is about time that we spend less time watching. If you're spending more time watching than creating, you should start doing an evaluation. You know, for us to be able to bridge that gap where our stories are being told by other people who have never experienced our lifestyles, or even with that little research that they do have, you'll see that many a times in the Western space, they have movies about superheroes. If you do a bit of digging, you'll realize that most of those superheroes were bitten from history of Africa. If you look at films that were made by the great Stan, you know, most of those figures are stories that were told in folklore, which is African stories. When you hear and you watch stories, when you hear about Wakanda, Wakanda is definitely not in Asia, guys. Wakanda is a space in Africa, so yeah, I think it's just about time also see the importance of creating and not just intaking too much of the information, of the film, of the arts, of the information that's being sent to us through these mediums.
Yeah, and maybe just to double click on what Masentle is saying, I just want to borrow from what the late great King Sobhuza actually said. Noticing or recognizing that we were going into the space of a global village like we have right now, you use the word dilute. I think it's if we can just adjust that narrative and use the word integrate. So he said, from the rest of the world, take what's good and let's put it into our practices, because that makes us a better people. But if we see that something is not consistent with our values, then we leave that out and we leave it to them. So that's exactly what needs to happen right now. We need to allow the window or the door to say what we see and is good and is going to be an elixir, is going to accelerate what it is that we're trying to do. We take that and integrate it into our into our patterns, into our habits, into our practices. But what we see that is not going to take us to where we want to go, we leave that to them.
Okay, going off of what Sir just said, I believe that especially with the rise of globalization and the interchanging of cultures around the world, I believe that it could be a very good thing for us as a continent to sort of look at what the world has to offer and sort of like integrate these small pieces of what they represent or how they choose to express themselves into how we view ourselves as a people, and sort of adapt that and continue to grow and continue to create something new and unique that would better represent who we are to the rest of the world.
I would again emphasize the importance of developing localized platforms. I cannot emphasize enough how important that is. And maybe not necessarily from a monetary point of view, but just also from a development point of view. It's very hard if we don't have grassroots level localized platforms that can support the artistic development to then jump from being a new school or an emerging filmmaker and then suddenly have your production on a big platform like a Netflix or so forth. We do need, even at school levels, just like how when I was in high school we used to have a school newsletter, right? We need to translate that into new media and digital media. Schools need to have YouTube channels where the kids are starting to engage with the camera, with the young budding actors can start putting together a short film. It doesn't matter the quality, it's more about the skill, developing the skill, and even moving from that to community radio, community TV, or community-based digital platforms. And then more importantly, where now the government has to step in, national platforms that prioritize that. Our our public broadcasters should be leading the initiatives where young filmmakers are able to have an outlet to put out their work. Because if we're not able to go through the phases, we'll have less people ready to meet the demand at a higher scale. So we are far from creating the huge media platforms, but we have an opportunity to create a funnel or a production line that can have more people ready to meet the demand at a higher level. And I think that's something important that we as Africans, and even more especially as Emaswati, we need to dedicate ourselves to.
So, as mentioned, as Africans, we should integrate what is good and we should leave behind what the world wants, if that makes sense, to stay authentic to who we are. And as much as many of the panelists here have already answered the first part of this question, which is what would it look like for Africans to define and uphold our own standards of excellence in art, culture, and leadership in the future? The twist on this question is, are you optimistic about the role in AI in this sector?
Echo on the first part of the question, I'd also like to add on the element of community, that we cannot be creating in solitude. We need support. We need grace. We need to be corrected. We need honest criticism at times, and that is due to community. We need to hold each other's hands and hold each other accountable in order for the industry to grow. But where AI is concerned, I believe it's the same concept, where you cannot run away from the fact that AI exists and it's there. But what we can do is prepare ourselves on how better to prompt before the AI prompts us. And the better way is is that we learn. You know, don't shy and run away and just shun it and just say, oh, AI, I don't want to be associated. I always try to explain the concept in the easiest form, which is, I don't know if many of you guys found the 3310s. You know those phones, the Nokias? Do you guys know what Nokias are? We had Nokias back in the day with buttons, you know, and they slowly faded away. And I remember having a conversation with my granny when she first saw that I had a touch screen, and she was on some, oh no, how am I going to use this? And I had to educate her to say, if you don't learn, tomorrow you will not be able to find a phone with buttons as so today. With my knowledge is that even the phones, the Nokias and those phones are like banned. I don't think they sell them anymore because of other reasons, the infrareds and other reasons that they have. My point is to say, if you do not prepare yourself, if you are ignorant from the perspective that AI exists, it's here, so what you have to do is just prepare yourself and make it work for you before it makes you work for itself.
I do believe that AI is something that is going to get bigger and bigger as we progress into the future. And a problem I've seen amongst the young people or people my age is that they sort of use AI to think for them and to sort of like shun their creativity. Or yeah, so I believe that it's time we started learning to use it as a tool. And like she said, like we shouldn't run away from it because it's inevitable. It's part of our future that we're growing into. So I feel like we should start using it as a tool or something to amplify our creativity instead of sort of using it to do everything for us.
As someone who works in copyright, I don't have many good things to say about AI. But I will say this, AI is an amazing tool, which we are moving into a future where it will be almost inevitable not to use. But I think for me, what's important is for us to recognize still that at the end of the day, it's a tool. So let's use it as a tool. And let's not use it to replace human intellect. And let's not use it as a tool to replace human creativity. I still think there's many ethical considerations that has to go into AI. And I think a lot of countries are currently having those conversations around policies and regulations around AI, because the prompting itself, there is an element of copyright infringement because the AI, if you understand how AI works, the model goes and studies or learns from an existing data set, which is people's existing intellectual property, and then uses that to generate something that is new. So to a large extent, there is theft. That's unauthorized use. So there's still some ethical considerations that need to go into it, but purely as a tool, we have to familiarize ourselves with artificial intelligence because it will help us to be more efficient in what we do. But let it not replace human intellect and human creativity. And furthermore, I think people are smart. We are going to get exhausted with all these AI-generated works. There's something beautiful about art. It comes from the soul. When someone creates something, they're giving birth to it. There's so much soul that goes into that, that at some point it will be so easy. I don't know about you, but I can hear an AI song from a mile away, and I'm exhausted. I have AI fatigue. I just switch it off. So that is to say that for now, I think it's just it's a buzz. There's a buzz factor to it, to like, oh, AI can do this, it can do that, and people are just exploring and experimenting. But realistically, I do believe human creativity shall reign supreme because of the soul that exists in it. So embrace AI, use AI, but do consider the ethical considerations behind AI.
Yeah, I just want to circle back to something that Mr. Hlanze has been reiterating, this idea of creating our own platforms. And I think that's exactly where this thing is going to start. Currently, we are consumers of new technologies, of new ideologies, especially that come from the West into Africa. I mean, Sviso, I was in Chicago earlier this year, and I'm walking down the street, about to cross the road, and this contraption comes and parks next to me. It's also waiting for the light to turn green. As soon as the light turns green, this thing is moving by itself. I look around to see who's carrying the remote. This thing is moving around by itself. I eventually ask, what is that? Somebody says, yeah, that thing is going to deliver a pizza and a burger somewhere. I'm saying this to say we are constantly trailing behind. The other side of the world is so far ahead with technology and technological adaptation. And we find ourselves keep on following. Why? Because we're using the platforms that have already been set. Ours is to now have platforms just like this one, to have conversations to say, how do we gradually and intentionally start to create platforms that will serve us from where we are? Because as long as we're trailing behind, as long as we're following, as long as we're following trends and not setting them, then we don't even have a say in the matter. It is what it is because we are operating within the systems that already exist. So ours is to insist on creating our own platforms.
With that being said, I really like what Mr. Sibanze raised. Us creating the platforms to share the creativity that we want to share in our vision. Yeah. So for our next question, we have, how do the people who engage with your art shape its purpose, and how does this amplify African voices? To repeat the question, how do the people who engage with your art shape its purpose, and how does it amplify African voices?
In as much as art is a business, creativity and art, serves a higher purpose beyond just that. If you look at Africans, we used it to tell our stories, to tell our past, right? In a Siswati context, we use it to trace our lineage. If you think about tinangatelo, right? So I say this to say it plays a higher role, and recognizing this, I think for me, is the linkage between you and your audience. I go back to what I said earlier about identifying your values. The audience always dictates. So the audience will always gravitate towards where they resonate with either the values or whatever the case may be, right? It's like if you're in a foreign land and you know no one speaks Swati here, and you suddenly hear someone saying your praise names, right? You turn instantly because you recognize that and you resonate with that. So I think us just going back and finding those linkages will help us to build the audiences. The audience is there. The audience is always waiting and willing to consume. It's a matter of whatever is on the table, the audience then decides that I like this artist or I like that artist because they represent this or that or the other, right? So for me, finding that linkage is us finding ourselves, identifying the values, and then communicating that to the audience, and then the audience will gravitate towards you. And I think naturally that amplifies African voices, because one African saying something on another corner to an African on the other corner, there's a resonance there, there's a linkage. So connecting to the diaspora, when we do that, it will amplify our voices, because Africans are all over the world, right? And those linkages will only become stronger. I mean, Afro beats and the Nigerian diaspora is a perfect example of that. And I think that goes beyond just what the West Africans have managed to do. Even Natsis Maswati, I'm sure all of you have a relative somewhere across the side of the world, right? So the more we use who we are and our values to link with those people, the more our voice grows strong and becomes more prominent.
So your question had various elements in there, and one of, or rather two of those elements were purpose, and rather how does the audience influence the or rather impact the purpose of the creation. I'm of the idea that it should be the other way around. Should be from the inside out and not from the outside in. That's why I don't mind if I put out a piece of creation, whether it's a song, whether it's a spoken word poem, whether it's a film, whatever it is. We, again, going back to the systems of social media, say followers, friends, likes, shares and tweets and retweets. But Ubuntu says it shouldn't matter whether the creation that I made impacts 1,000 or 100,000. We are so caught up in chasing 100,000, we have forgotten to focus on one. And if we can make an impact in the one, then I feel like what I have created has done its job.
I definitely agree with what you're saying, Mrs. Banze. But to first, how I'll answer this question is that I'll start looking into how the audience basically determines, determines what we create. The first thing that you have to do as a creative, especially if you're going to look at it from a business perspective, is to look at what problem are you solving. Right? Then you are able to have your specific niche to a problem that is being solved. However, I did write a few words, when I was thinking of what will I say when I got here. And this question kind of reinforced my words that I thought of this morning, which were this creative industry isn't just about producing beautiful work. It's about producing possibilities. So the fact that something probably doesn't exist, which is what the audience always resonates with, there's always a possibility for something new that they may relate to, right? So it's about every story that we tell especially me, speaking for myself, is about preserving memory. That is what I believe the problem is, where the gap is. What is the problem that I am solving? The issue of remembering, right? We have lost so much of our identity and we cannot remember. Therefore, mine is to preserve memory, right? Which also at the same time enforces and creates employment. It also strengthens our identity, and it basically invites the world. Again, the audience who had never had a peep into what is happening in Africa, they get to taste a piece of Africa now, especially if it is told from the perspective of the African, right? And my hope from each and every one of you who has attended here is that you leave your understanding that your creativity isn't something that you need to hide or ask for permission from the next person. You know, which is the question that was basically saying that what is the audience imparting or impacting in what creativity that we put out there. I am saying you don't have to wait for the audience to determine whether you should dance or sing or tell a film, or you should not wait for their for their permission, to be able to speak your mind and speak your truth, right? It is already part of Africa's amplified mosaic. The question is not whether your voice belongs. The question is, how will you use it to shape the future where you belong? Got it.
Yeah.
Going off of what Masentle just said, I do believe in first identifying a problem or a gap in your community or in the world at large, and then seeing how your craft can solve or bridge that gap. And for me, on a personal perspective, I've seen that a lot of people, especially in my community, in my school, have been sort of taught to suppress who they actually are in order to fit in. So in me dancing, I can invite someone maybe who doesn't know how to dance. You know, if you can move, if you can do anything, just come, let's dance, let's have a few moves. And that's how I build community. That's how I help people find a sense of belonging. And so I really do believe in actually finding your niche and then using that in addition to your craft, sort of make your community a better place.
Sorry, just piggybacking on what Masentle said as well. There's a hip-hop documentary that just talks about the different elements of hip-hop. And in there, they gave one of the best descriptions of the DJ. He said, this is DJ Kool Herc. He says, the DJ exists in two life times at the same time. The DJ is here with us right now as we're dancing to the Macarena. We're all in the room right now having the best time of our lives dancing to the Macarena. In his ear, he already knows what's going to happen 60 seconds from now. Even before we know it, he knows that in 60 seconds, I'm about to drop Sister Bettina and this place is going to go wild. We don't know it yet, but he does. And that's exactly what the creative does. The creative exists in this timeline, seeing what we're seeing, enjoying what we're enjoying, but the creative also knows that 60 seconds from now, I'm about to flip this whole thing on its head. But we don't know it. We would rather sit in the Macarena because this is familiar and we're having a good time. But as the creative, Puti, please drop Sister Bettina and mess this place up because we don't even know, but you already know.
So for our next question, a little bit unfamiliar. How could collaboration between African artists and other non-Western creatives have a meaningful global impact?
I have to say that the future belongs to collaborators. I'd like to end it there. The future belongs to collaborators. You cannot want to say, I want to be a star. You know, what I do, I believe that what I do is for the country, is for the people. It's not to say, oh, Gwendiwang Masentle logo, oh, Masentle is a star, and stuff like that. For what I am doing is a legacy. That's why I say collaboration. We're doing it for the people, with the people. It's not done in isolation of self. But it's not for self-glory, right? Instead, it's for the who's coming tomorrow. What will they find? What will they identify as their identity? What will they find in terms of information where research is also concerned? So collaboration, community, we cannot do it in solitude. We need help with funding. We need help with the actual creating, where distribution is concerned, where copywriting is concerned. Like you said, we have like about 13 departments in the film industry. We cannot do it by ourselves. We have costume, makeup, production, we have drivers, catering. There's just a lot that goes into it. So community and doing it for the people rather than wanting to glorify self. Yeah.
And I do believe that there's always something to learn from someone else. So if you are also actively pouring into somebody and they're pouring into you, I feel like that produces more creativity, more innovation, and it allows you to grow as a person as you are helping your community grow. And I think that's what art is all about. It's about us being able to not only use our creativity for our personal glory, but also to help build community, to help grow, to help also remember the past and to move forward into the future.
We cannot grow without collaboration. I think it has already been said well. The cross-pollination with the rest of Africa is inevitable if we want to grow our local markets. Collaboration is how you reach newer audiences, you exchange audiences and grow each other's markets. Collaboration is how you improve each other's skills, because there's also a skills exchange that happens there. And collaboration beyond the skills exchange will help us to do big things with less resources, because we get to share the cost, if I may put it that way. So collaboration is definitely the key if we're looking to grow our individual markets and the African market as a whole.
The future belongs to collaborators. I feel like you should slap that on a t-shirt. That needs to be like a campaign, a movement or something. Because even just on this stage, the music that I make, he copyrights, she dances to it, she makes the music video, and you introduce it to the audience. Even on this stage, there's collaboration already. How much more when we zoom out to the rest of the world? Look, if even Fortune 500 companies are collaborating, how much more me and you who are only fortunate enough to have 500 in our pockets? We definitely need to collaborate.
Africa fosters a plethora of powerful and beautiful ideas, born into us, executed by us. A continent of excellence and beauty, skills we cannot ignore. With that being said, the question part of this panel is now concluded. Power and wisdom has been elegantly shared amongst us, statements that extended beyond just sentences, but rather embodiments of burning passion. We hope that you in the audience have been enlightened by the discussion that we have had today. I hope you guys take notes, and I hope that you employ yourself into the creative industry in Africa, because the future depends on you. And as said, the future is collaborators. As Africans, we need to find a community in ourselves and collaborate as youth to define what the future is. Thank you so much once again for attending. Thank you to our esteemed panelists for their expertise. Can we please give a warm round of applause? With that being said, we will now move on to gift giving to our panelists.
Thank you so much for facilitating that wonderful conversation. I think that I can speak for the whole room when we say we're very grateful for your presence here on campus and the insight that you've given to this conversation. And just for a token of our appreciation, we wanted to present you with some gifts before we move on to a short game.
So